The best golfer in the world lost a playoff on a Monday afternoon in Phoenix and decided to drive home. That's it. That's the decision. Everybody else on tour packed up and went south to Tucson for the next tournament. Ben Hogan pointed his car east instead, toward Fort Worth, about 1,000 miles away, because he was tired. Not of golf. He'd said it more than once, that it was never the golf that wore him out. It was the traveling. 36 hours later, he was lying in the wreckage of that car on a highway in West Texas with his pelvis broken in 2 places, and the news wires were telling America he was dead. He wasn't. And what happened over the next 16 months turned a very good golfer into the most mythologized figure the sport has ever produced. That's the strange arithmetic of this story. The 24 hours that ended Ben Hogan's career are the exact same 24 hours that made him immortal. So let's walk through them properly, because almost everything you think you know about what happened in that car, including the single most famous detail, is more complicated than the version you've heard. Start on the Monday. Phoenix, the last day of January, 1949. Hogan is 36 years old, and he is, by any measure, the best player alive. He'd won 10 tournaments the year before. He'd won the US Open and the PGA Championship in the same season for the first time. 2 weeks before this, his face had been on the cover of Time magazine, under a line that could serve as his epitaph. If you can't outplay them, outwork them. That Monday, he's in an 18-hole playoff at the Phoenix Open against his friend Jimmy Demaret. They tee off at 12:30. Demaret shoots 67. Hogan shoots 70. Demaret takes the $2,000 and gives one of the great mangled quotes in golf history, saying he felt like a racehorse beating citation. He meant it the other way around. Everybody knew what he meant. And then the tour packs up and heads for Tucson, and the Hogans don't. Tuesday, they drive 550 miles east across the desert on Highway 80, a 2-lane road with Mexico off to the right and not much else in any direction. This is what professional golf actually was in 1949, not private jets. A man and his wife in a car, for days at a time. They stop for the night in a small town called Van Horn, in far west Texas, at a place called the El Capitan. $4.50 for the room. They're a little over halfway home, with about 480 miles still to go. Now the clock is really running. Wednesday morning, the 2nd of February. Groundhog Day. Hogan is up before the sun, which is entirely in character, and goes down to the coffee shop for breakfast. Then he packs the car, a brand new black Cadillac, loads Valerie's things and his golf clubs, and they pull out somewhere around 8 in the morning. And they drive straight into weather. There's fog on the road east of Van Horn, thick enough that you can see maybe 150, 200 feet ahead of you. There's a thin film of ice on the asphalt. Hogan slows the Cadillac down to about 25 miles an hour, which tells you how bad it was, because Hogan was not a cautious man by temperament. Somewhere out there, coming the other way, is a Greyhound bus, 20,000 pounds. It's running behind schedule, and it's doing something like 50 miles an hour in fog you can barely see through, and it decides to pass a truck. To do that, it has to move into the eastbound lane. Hogan's lane. He was approaching a small bridge when it happened, which mattered enormously because a bridge means no shoulder. There was nowhere to go. Valerie would say afterward that there was a culvert on the right, and her husband simply could not get around it. Hogan later described the moment he understood. He said he saw 4 lights winking at him. He jerked the car as hard right as it would go. And then he threw himself across the front seat, on top of his wife. The 2 vehicles, in Valerie's words, met squarely. Now, before we go further, I want to be honest with you about something, because this is where most tellings of this story stop being careful. The precise mechanics of that collision are genuinely disputed. Some accounts say the steering column was driven back through the driver's seat. Others say the steering wheel ended up in the back seat. Valerie herself, talking to a reporter within days of the crash, said the engine was hurled backward into the front seat. those can't all be right. What is not disputed is that the place where Ben Hogan had been sitting a second earlier was destroyed, and that he was no longer sitting in it. He was alive. His pelvis was fractured in 2 places. His collarbone was broken. His left ankle was broken. A rib was chipped. Valerie, underneath him, had minor injuries and nothing more. And then nothing happened for an hour and a half. That's the detail that sticks with me. Ben Hogan lay in that wreck on a foggy highway in the middle of the desert for roughly 90 minutes before an ambulance arrived, and the reason is almost unbearably ordinary. A crowd had gathered. Everybody assumed somebody else had already called for help, so nobody did. Meanwhile, the fog kept doing what fog does. Behind them, 4 more cars ran into that truck, one after another, brakes and metal, out there in the gray. At some point in that 90 minutes, Valerie Hogan walked over to the driver of the bus and said something that has survived for 75 years. "You coward," she said. "Why don't you go over and see what you've done to my husband?" When the ambulance finally came, it carried him about 150 miles west, back the way they'd come, to a hospital in El Paso. And while he was in it, America was told he was dead. The wire services got it wrong and put it out, and it went everywhere. Down at the Tucson Country Club, Jimmy Demaret, who had beaten him in a playoff 48 hours earlier, was playing in a Pro-Am when the owner of the New York Yankees walked up and told him Ben Hogan had been killed in a car wreck. Demaret walked straight off the golf course, found a telephone, and called the Texas State Highway Department to ask if it was true. It wasn't, and Demaret said afterward that it felt good, damned good. If you're enjoying this kind of story, the ones where the real detail is stranger than the version everyone repeats, that's what this channel does. So consider subscribing, because the part that comes next is where it gets genuinely close. Because surviving the crash was not the hard part. For the first month in that El Paso hospital, the story is broken bones, and broken bones heal. Then, about a month in, blood clots began forming in his left leg. And that changes everything, because a clot that travels to your lungs or your heart in 1949 kills you. There is no clever fix. For roughly 10 days, his doctors were seriously worried he was going to die in that bed. What happened next is the part of this story I'd never heard, and it's remarkable. A brigadier general in the United States Air Force named David Hutchinson arranged for a B-29 bomber to be sent to New Orleans to collect a surgeon. The surgeon was Dr. Alton Ochsner, a vascular specialist from Tulane, one of the few men in the country who could do what needed doing. The Air Force flew him to El Paso. He examined Hogan, and then he told him the truth, which was that the operation he was proposing carried serious, lifelong consequences, and that Hogan might never play golf again. They gave Hogan 3 units of blood. The operation started just after 6:30 in the evening on the 3rd of March. It took 2 hours. Ochsner tied off the vena cava, the major vein carrying blood from the lower body back to the heart, so that no clot could ever make that journey. Then, a few hours after finishing, at midnight, he flew home to New Orleans. It saved Hogan's life. It also meant that for the rest of that life, his legs would never work properly again. The circulation was permanently compromised. He would wrap them in bandages every single day and soak them in hot water and Epsom salts after every round of golf he ever played. He got out of bed for the first time on the 14th of March, 11 days after surgery. He was discharged on the 1st of April, 59 days after the crash. He went home to Fort Worth by train, and there are photographs of him being carried off it on a stretcher with his mother walking alongside. The doctor's view was that he might not walk again. Competitive golf was not seriously on the table. Here's what he did instead. By September, he was well enough to travel to England by ship as the non-playing captain of the American Ryder Cup team, and the Americans won. On the 11th of December, 10 months after the bus, he played his first full 18 holes. In January, he entered the Los Angeles Open, his first tournament back. He tied Sam Snead over 72 holes. He lost the playoff, but he tied Sam Snead, 11 months after being carried out of a car wreck. And then, in June of 1950, 16 months after the crash, he went to Marion, outside Philadelphia, for the US Open. The championship in those days finished with 36 holes on the final day. 36 holes, walking, on legs that didn't circulate blood properly. He carried a small folding chair and sat down between shots. On the 12th tee in the last round, he wrenched his knee, and when people fussed, he told them to forget it, that he imagined everybody was getting tired of reading about his injuries. For the rest of the round, his caddy had to lift his ball out of the hole for him because bending down wasn't worth what it cost him. He came to the last hole needing a par to tie. The 18th at Marion is a long, brutal par 4, and Hogan hit a 1-iron, which is the hardest club in the bag to hit well, from about 200 yards, over a quarry, onto the green, 40 feet from the hole. A photographer named Hy Peskin took a picture of that swing from behind him, and it became probably the most famous photograph in the history of golf. He two-putted. He got into the playoff, and the next afternoon he shot 69 to win it, beating Lloyd Mangrum and George Fazio and taking his 4th major championship. 16 months after doctors weren't sure he'd walk. He wasn't finished either. He would go on to win 5 more majors after that, including 1953, when he won 3 of them in a single year, a season nobody has matched in the 70 years since. So that's the paradox at the center of this. The 24 hours that should have ended, Ben Hogan produced the version of him that we actually remember. Before the crash, he was a great, cold, relentless player that the public admired without especially loving. After it, he was something else. A man who came back from the dead. Which brings me to the last thing, and it's the part I find hardest to shake. The single most famous detail of this entire story is that Ben Hogan threw himself across his wife to save her. It's in every retelling. It's the reason people call it courage rather than luck. And the source of it is Valerie, in her first interview, given within hours of the accident, when she said her husband threw himself in front of her to protect her. Every newspaper in the country printed it, and that sentence is where the legend of the Hawk really began. But years afterward, according to reporting by Golf Digest, Hogan was sitting with a friend having a drink, and the subject came up. And he put out his cigarette and said the whole thing was nonsense. He said he was trying to get out of the way of the bus. Now, there's no way to settle that, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Maybe he was being honest, and the heroism was invented by a frightened woman and a hungry press. Maybe he was a private, deeply uncomfortable man deflecting praise the only way he knew how, which would be entirely in character. Both readings fit the man. But here's the part neither reading changes. Whatever his reason for moving, the move is why they both lived. And what he did afterward, the 14 months of hospital beds and bandages and a surgeon flown across the country in a bomber, was not instinct. That part he chose, every day, for the rest of his life. So what do you think? Was it courage in the moment, or just a man trying to survive who spent the next 40 years being called a hero for it? Tell me below. And if you like the stories behind the stories in this game, that's what we do here, so stick around.